Hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil Live. I'm Mike King, and it's great to be with you. We're going to get rolling pretty darn quick tonight, but I want to shout out there's been a few of you who have already been in sharing some comments, and thank you to the mods and to all of you for being here. I want to tell you tonight we're doing something I think that will be rather special. I just finished another hour of court TV on the Daybell case. We're not talking Daybell. We're talking part of this Fundamentalist Friday thing that we've been doing here on Profiling Evil and with my friends over at Growing Up in Polygamy. And I want to bring them in right now, Sam and Melissa. It is so neat to have you here with us tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Our pleasure.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, I'll tell you, this has been a really fun experience. I think we started back in, we came to know each other over a year or more ago. In fact, I think maybe even 2 years now, when I was actually doing a lot of work out in the community. And I saw a video that Sam put up about the Zion over the archways of houses, and your video was actually in front of your house, Sam, which was in downtown Hilldale, if there's a downtown Hilldale, and that's how we came to know each other.
I guess downtown as you can get. That was where I was. But yes, it was a really cool experience to connect with you over some of these details and to hear your perspective as a law enforcement officer out there during the same time that I was there growing up. So it was really cool to collaborate with you. And we've had a great time showing on our channel as well the videos that we did out there together.
That was a lot of fun. And I think back, my experience was obviously as an investigator for many years, leading up through Rulon Jeff's death and into Warren Jeff's becoming the prophet, when things really took a serious turn for the worst within Short Creek or Hilldale, Colorado City. But Melissa, I'm kind of interested, before we talk about how Sam migrated over and fell in love with you, what were your thoughts about the polygamous community out in Short Creek before you ever knew you were going to fall in love with a kid growing up in polygamy?
Yeah, so I grew up in St. George, Utah, which is about 45 minutes away. So growing up there, we always knew that the community was there. Actually, funny story, as a young girl, I was living in Laverkin for a while, which is, you kind of have to go through Hurricane to get up into Hilldale and get to Short Creek. And one of my first time ever on a teeter-totter was with a polygamous kid, because my mom had taken us and heard that there were amazing parks out in Hilldale. And so we went to Cottonwood Park, and there were all of these playgrounds. And as a little kid, I was like, this is like 6 parks in one park. And we didn't really realize that the community was closed off at all. But we were the only people not there in prairie dresses. And I got on a teeter-totter, and there was a kid, and I went to the other side to see. And anyway, so it's super funny. But they were just, to us, I was raised mainstream LDS. And so we just felt like they were like our religious cousins. They're still practicing polygamy, but they're just trying to live their religion, good people. Everyone should leave them alone. And we would see them. I'd say it wasn't until I was a teenager that some of the lost boys or boys were being kicked out at a super young age. So then some people in my neighborhood had taken in some boys that had been kicked out. And that's when I felt like it wasn't until I was a teenager that there was this idea of, wait a minute, they're kicking out 13-year-old kids? What's going on out there? We thought they were just this peaceful, quiet community and our cousins. And then it started to seem like there was more going on that we never really knew about, even though we were in such close proximity.
I find that really interesting that your mom would take you out there. Of course, I've had the privilege of meeting your parents. And I guess the question I would have is, were you treated oddly? Were there children don't know really a lot, but I'm going to have you, right after she weighs in on this, Sam, weigh in, because children knew a lot about outsiders within that community. So number one, I guess, Melissa, did you feel like you were clearly not in a place that you were wanted? And Sam, kind of help people understand what children were taught about people from the outside after Melissa's done.
Yeah, so I think my mom we didn't know, honestly, like a whole lot. Like, I don't think we ever thought that we wouldn't be welcome. My mom just heard about this amazing park. And again, like Cottonwood Park, like at that time, there were like these huge, they're not even there anymore, but they were like huge, like multiple playgrounds all at the same park. And so it was just unlike anything we'd ever seen. So my mom heard about this park. We went and it was amazing. And there weren't a whole lot of people there. I never felt like really worried or unsafe. I don't remember my mom saying anything about feeling like we weren't welcome there. I do remember thinking that they were really quiet, like that they didn't really say much to us, or they looked a little bit confused as to why we were there. But there wasn't a ton of people around, and so nothing made us feel uncomfortable or unsafe at all. But they were just quiet. I think the kid I teeter-tottered with didn't say a word to me. It was just like, I can't believe this little girl is like, can I teeter-totter with you? And and they just played with me for a minute and didn't say a word. And I don't know, it was still a good experience, and like kind of etched in my mind as something that was super fun. And now looking back, now I know what a big deal that must have been. Or was the mother looking like, my kid can't play with that person, but we don't want to even tell a child to like leave? I don't know. We probably just confuse them a lot.
Yeah, I believe Melissa's told this story before on our channel as well, about the teeter-tottering with a polygamous boy, or a boy within the polygamous community anyway. And people have probably wondered, oh, maybe it was Sam. Could that possibly have been Sam? I'll just tell you, no. It's absolutely impossible, because my mother would have never allowed such a thing. I had a mother that was very strict with all of the rules out there in the FLDS. And yeah, that would have never happened. She had eyes like a hawk on her kids at all times, which is impressive because there were 12 of us, but somehow she did it. Just to kind of sum it up, that kind of thing, it wasn't really allowed for outsiders to come in. At least they weren't welcome with open arms. I don't remember. You were so young. I don't know if you would have
picked up on
that at all or not. But back in those days, though, not that you're that old, but way back in those days, things weren't quite as strict as they got later on.
Well, that was pre-Warren Jeffs too.
Before he was the prophet, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been like in 2000. I think I was 9 years old, 9 or 10. So it would have been in 2000. So like I said, I'm going to have to ask my mom if she remembers, like I never remember her saying she was uncomfortable or anything like that. So I'll have to ask her and see if there was more to it. And I was just an oblivious kid, just super excited about all the playgrounds or what it was. But
it was a really fun park, though. I will agree with you.
And they had like dangerous stuff, like in St. George, is already the age of like, okay, we have to make sure the playgrounds are safe and nobody can get hurt and nothing too dangerous. But it was like metal and they were big. I don't know, or I was little, but is it my memory or is it just they were huge?
They were big. Well, I was also young when I was playing on those, but it seemed like they were dinosaur-sized teeter-totters. And we had this tire swing. I don't know if you tried out the tire swing or not.
I don't remember.
Probably too dangerous for you. But for us braver people out there in the community, there was this tire swing that hung from one of the big Cottonwood Park trees, cotton trees there in Cottonwood Park. And you get that thing swinging, and we were probably 40 feet in the air. That thing was really a dangerous swing, but we had a lot of fun. And I guess there weren't too many regulations in that park back then.
Well, I'm going to be the devil's advocate to one thing that that you said, Sam, and that was about how you would have been stopped from, number one, I know your family would have stopped you from talking to an outsider, because I knew your dad. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we talk through what we went through going through the community together. But I often tease Sam, folks, because I remember one day actually taking my family out there. We were driving to Zion, and I took a side road and came back through, and we were in our little Dodge Caravan, which I don't know how that little thumbs up happened, but I understand it's AI now. But as I pulled into town, we were wandering around, and the God Squad was following us. And folks, there's this team of people who worked for the church under the direction of a man named Willie Jessup, Willie Jessup, and they would, in a very intimidating way, follow you around town when you came into that community if you were not a member of that community. And Melissa, I don't know if you've been on the chats with Sam as I've asked this, but on one particular occasion, we pulled up and we were looking at the elk, and a group of young boys were standing there, and one of them walked over and flipped us the middle finger while we were sitting in the car. And I've always accused Sam of being that boy.
Just in case my father ever sees this, that was definitely not me. I was a good boy. Would have never done such a thing.
Well, great. Hey, so what I thought would be kind of fun is I thought we would just go through and talk about some of the things that we visited over the last couple of months together, Sam, and have you kind of weigh in on things from your perspective. I'll do the same from my perspective. And we'll use this as an opportunity to invite people to go back to Growing Up in Polygamy and see some of the episodes that you and Melissa put out, and go back and see mine. So folks, if you haven't subscribed to Growing Up in Polygamy, please make sure you do that. And to the mods, make sure we get Sam and Melissa's channel link in there so people can go to that. But the first place that I want to just chat about for a minute, it really isn't a place. It's the first place that I often talk about when I talk about polygamy, and that is, what is polygamy? And someone actually put a note up in here asking if you and Melissa would ever consider practicing polygamy after you grew up in it. I think this would be a really great moment for you, Sam, to share from a kid's perspective. Polygamy was a pretty cool thing with all those kids around. And then maybe share from an adult perspective why or why not you and Melissa will either participate or not participate.
Yes, thank you. Great question. So growing up in it, yes, I thought it was a lot of fun having so many brothers and sisters in the home. Having 4 moms in the home was great at some times. Other times I felt like I was always being watched. Could never get away with anything because there were 4 moms in the house. But ultimately, I felt like I had a really good childhood. I was lucky. I know that there are a lot of other people that grew up in the FLDS community that don't feel the same way. But I do feel that I had 4 mothers. Of course, my biological mother, which I was very aware of who she was. That wasn't there wasn't like a secret of who you belong to. It was very clear. And then as my father, he was very busy. And with that many kids, I mean, I have 35 siblings. So a lot of kids, not all living in the home at one time, because some were married and long gone before I was ever born. So, but there were in the high teens in the home at one time. And so there were a lot of us, and it was difficult for my father to spend one-on-one time with all of his kids. And so that's something that I wish I would have been able to have a closer relationship with him. But I mean, I did see him try to have a good relationship with his family and try to do things together, but ultimately it was very challenging. And that just wasn't something that was really a possibility. So I did feel like it was a good childhood, a lot of fun with all of the brothers and sisters and that in the home, always someone to play with and have a good time with. But yes, looking back on that experience now that I'm adult and have kids of our own, it is definitely not a lifestyle that I would ever want for us or for my kids. I cherish the one-on-one intimate, close relationship that I have with my kids, and the ability to come home and for them to run up and say, "Hey, Daddy," and give me a hug and ask any question under the sun, and I'll just drop everything and have that time with them. And that's something that I cherish now as a dad. And looking back on my lifestyle, I felt that I had a good childhood as a child, but it's not something that I would want for my family.
Yeah, we get that question a lot. As far as, well, two questions we get a lot, I guess. One is whether or not we'd ever be open to polygamy, and the answer is definitely no. Something that's important to mention about the polygamy that Sam grew up in is that it's a religious doctrine, right? So it wasn't just a lifestyle choice on its own. It has, religion doctrine tied to it. And so that is why his family is so strongly practicing it. I grew up in a religion where that was no longer practiced and wasn't acceptable. And then just personally outside of religion, it's not something that either of us would ever want as part of our relationship. But another question, the second one that we get a lot is, with Sam having 34 siblings, does he want like 1 million kids? Like, does he want me to have 12 kids, or us to have 12 kids? And like Sam mentioned, it was kind of the opposite. When we got married, I think we even thought we would have more children.
We thought we'd have probably 4.
4, that's what I grew up with. That felt comfortable. And then when we had 2, we felt like 2 was the perfect number. So we have 2 children. And I think a lot of that came from Sam wanting to give his kids the most attention he possibly could. And
now, of course, polygamy, generally speaking, at least with the communities that I'm familiar with, that polygamy generally comes with a lot of kids because there is no kind of birth control allowed in these communities. So therefore, you have multiple wives, you have 12, 11, even, maybe more, some 15 kids with
as many children as God will give you.
Women. That just ends up being a really big family. But beyond that, I mean, even not talking about the kids here, I would never want a second wife. That's just not something. It's interesting because I grew up in a home where that was so normal. It wasn't an odd thing to me. It just seemed like the normal, natural way of life because that's what I saw and grew up with. But for me now, it's just not because Melissa's a lot to handle, but because I just can't imagine wanting to share my attention or give my attention to anyone but her.
All of that is really interesting. And one of the things that I think I learned from you and many other children who grew up in polygamous homes also was the fact that the father is often disconnected from the children, and the mother or mothers are the ones who really do the majority of the child rearing. And when the father comes home, it's almost like a visiting dignitary, and there's like a certain aura around them. Did you have that same sense with your dad and, frankly, 34 siblings?
Yes. Yes, he was, and partly because of the religious belief as well. He was like a ruler. It was, he was there to enforce the rules and to make sure everyone was being obedient to the church rules and laws of the church land and all of that. So when he would enter a room, everyone would quiet down. We were taught to be very respectful. He wasn't always around. And so when he was, it was a very different vibe in the room because of that. And I think a lot of it was just because we were taught to look at him as this head of the house that we were supposed to respect and obey no matter what. And
he ended up making, it was his say was always the last word. So any mother's decision still had to be run by him.
Yep.
So that in the end, all of the mothers still had like a cohesive set of rules almost. It wasn't each mother coming up with their own household rules. Everything had to go through his father still.
It was very different than what people might see in like the Brown family, the Sister Wives show. That was not even close to the way it was in my home, because we were all in one home living together, and the mothers would obey and do what father said. That was their duty, to obey him no matter what.
I want to pause long enough to let everyone know I'm talking to Sam and Melissa from the YouTube channel Growing Up in Polygamy. Sam and I had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time out in Colorado City, Hilldale, used to be called Short Creek, so you might hear us use all three names at times. And we traveled from all the places that troubled me as an investigator working for the Attorney General. And of course, I spent much of my career looking at cults and cult behavior and closed societies. And I always kind of categorized those in the polygamous communities as a closed society, because originally we didn't know what the extent was of criminal behavior. And when I talk cults, I'm talking about that coercive mind control that we saw really come into play with Warren Jeffs after Ruland's death in 2002. I had the opportunity, folks, for many years to go into that community. It was a terribly cold reception. My friendship with Sam and Melissa is just this great opportunity for me to now have a friend from inside, because I didn't have any back then, but slowly over the years, we've created more. But I wanted to call out just a couple of friends who, the Silver Linings podcast, another podcast that you might consider. We were just on Court TV together, Sam, Melissa, and Silver Linings. This is a family of Lori Vallow Daybell, who was convicted of murdering her children and murdering her new lover, husband's wife. And of course, I spend a lot of time on Court TV talking about cult behaviors, which is kind of a nice segue into what we're talking about tonight, folks, which is cult behavior. And I want to just say, as we go back and think about this idea of what we're chatting about tonight, which is, I want to get to this one where I'm showing both of you, this idea of polygamy. You can go back and watch one of my earlier videos. It's this one, A Peek Inside Current Day Polygamy, where I talk about the mainstream Latter-day Saint faith and the fact that they actually banned polygamy back in 1890, but a group of polygamists were unhappy with that decision. And I don't even argue whether it was because it was banned because federal law said it was against the law, or that they believed that it no longer was needed on the earth. It was a polygamy was practiced biblically, going back to Adam and Eve, and you can read all about polygamy in Genesis, but it was officially discontinued by the mainstream Latter-day Saint faith. Many people today still want to tie it to the mainstream Latter-day Saint faith, and I say, no, this is a fundamental group in Colorado City, Hilldale, and now spreading out throughout the world. And so please go back and watch that. And you can also catch a companion to all of my videos on growing up in polygamy, right, Sam?
Yes, we've enjoyed releasing the videos there as well. A little bit different because Melissa and I are reacting to the video that you and I did together, Mike. And of course, on your channel, you are talking and giving more insight on all of that as well. So I think we're sharing pieces and parts of the same video, but very different perspectives.
It was fun for me to have an opportunity to get to see because I wasn't able to go out and hang out with you guys that day. I was taking care of kiddos. And so it was really fun for me to get to see what you guys were doing and put in my 2 cents, I guess. It was a lot of fun.
That I actually have liked that, folks. And if you're sensing a little bit of a pause, there is just the difference in where Sam and Melissa are and I am. There's a little pause between our comments. But Melissa, the thing I really enjoyed is watching you, because it was the first time you saw those when you were doing these reaction videos.
Yeah. I was trying to keep all of my reactions very raw, so I didn't look at them ahead of time.
Yeah.
I just want to go through some of the videos that we've done, because we've actually done so much in this series, folks, and I don't think you're going to want to miss these. If you have missed them, please go back and watch them. Some are longer than others, but let's just go through them, Sam, and share with me maybe your favorite memory from each one of these as we go through, and I'll share mine. Let's talk about Maxwell Park and what's in the water.
Deliciousness.
Yes. So Maxwell Park, man, when I think of Maxwell Park, the first memory that comes to mind is as a young child living there. It was just up the street from my home, and we would always go there for our fresh drinking water because that's kind of what it's known for, is the beauty surrounding the park, which is the other side of Zion National Park. If you just hiked over the mountains that you see in Zion National Park, you would be in Maxwell. So we would go up there for a good time, playing in the park, and also to get our fresh water to drink. And I would even take the challenge on occasion to take a 5-gallon jug up empty, fill it up, and carry it on my shoulder down to my home. Not because it was fun, but because my brothers would dare me to do it or tell me that I couldn't do it. So therefore, I would have to prove them wrong. So my father, being the mayor of Hilldale as well, was in charge of that park. So I had a lot of great times and memories there.
When I think of that, I have memories going back to going there. I was always going to the park to try to find your father or other polygamous leaders that otherwise I would never have a chance to bump into and talk to. So, but one of my favorite parts of Maxwell Park, and that I hope people will go and see, is the small cabin that's just on the north side, kind of the northeast corner of the Ball Diamonds. And folks, this cabin has been there since the late 1800s when it was built, but it's actually the vision that was used for the Snow White home in Disneyland. So if you like that home and the thoughts there, it's all modeled around this little tiny cabin that is there. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing Maxwell Park and talking about some of the things that are going on there. So folks, boy, make sure you're checking that one out as well. But then we went to something where I have spent a batch of time throughout my entire career. And I'm going to start off maybe sharing my thoughts, Sam, and then maybe if you could share yours. But folks, the Baby Cemetery, if you have not caught that episode, is a place where a number of infants are buried. Some ghost stories suggest 250 or more infants are buried in the cemetery. When I was an investigator and working in the community, I would ask community leaders for a map of the children that were buried in the cemetery, and most of those children only lived for a few days, and they were buried and considered to be buried in that infant cemetery. But I could never find any record, and the FLDS faithful wouldn't speak to me. The government, which would at that time have been Sam's father, wouldn't acknowledge that there were any records for the Baby Cemetery. The markings in there are very, they're getting a few newer stones in there, but most of them are just a scratched in name of girl, Jessup girl, or Jeff's boy, no names in many of those. And the thing that really troubled me is I met with county officials. There were no birth certificates on these children, nor were there death certificates. And that was what troubled me the most, Sam, was the fact that a death certificate is required to just guarantee that someone looks officially at the death of a child or the death of anyone, and that they rule out any possibilities of an unknown reason for the death or suspicious reasons, but those could never be found. And again, 35 years later, once I retired, I decided, folks, to create a map, and maybe after Sam is done sharing some of his thoughts and Melissa's thoughts, I'll share with you that map.
Yeah, interestingly, that Baby Cemetery was just across the street from where I grew up. So I saw that Baby Cemetery almost, if not every day, out there. And interestingly, you know more about it than I do. It just there wasn't a whole lot talked about when it came to the cemetery. I do have a half sibling that is born there. Now, this half sibling was born and died long before I ever was born. So I wasn't there to experience what it was like, burying a baby in the cemetery. I've asked around to some of the other people that were there during the time I was, and some people that are still following the FLDS belief. And all I can really get out of them is that it was just a special cemetery set aside for those stillborns or babies that were born into this world but didn't live. And it was in a pretty close proximity to the clinic there where all of, if not all, most of the children of the FLDS were born. And so that's really all the information I could get. It's just kind of a pretty secretive, quiet, whether it's meant to be that way or not, it's not talked about much.
Yeah, I do find it, like, obviously it's so sad to see a whole cemetery of babies. And it's interesting, like you've said, Mike, that there's not like the records for it. And yet they have a cemetery for them, right? Like if they were trying to stay completely secretive, they wouldn't like honor these little bodies in a way like that. And so I do always find it interesting that obviously they took care in like placing them in a cemetery and trying to show that, and yet there wasn't the documentation beyond that.
Right.
So it's an interesting conflict, I think.
Right.
So folks, what we're looking at on this map is the map that I created. Again, it troubled me so much over the years, and I was so frustrated with the fact that nobody would acknowledge these little babies as far as something official, that I decided to create it myself. And I want to just point out, this is the cemetery right here with all of these points on. We'll zoom in on that in a moment. But Sam, this was your home right here.
Yes. Just kitty corner to the cemetery there. Yeah. So I was looking at this every day, and it just, for some reason, I left the FLDS community when I was 18 years old. And so I didn't live out my many adult years there. Maybe I would have become more curious, but growing up out there, I just assumed it was normal to have a baby cemetery and didn't think to ask many questions about it.
Well, as we've talked about between the three of us, and as I've shared in one of the videos that I put out, I went in and decided that I was going to catalog every single grave I could find. And I was able to find 215, which was troubling to me because, again, the ghost stories were as many as 250 or more. But this cemetery was started in about 1950. And I only found a couple of graves that were dated back that far, but in the entire area that I couldn't find any graves in. I don't know if it was ever used for graves, but clearly there is about 20 years where I can't seem to find a lot of information. But on this map, and folks, it'll be in the links down below so that you can go in and explore it. But I made it so that you could go in and just start to explore the graves individually. So as you scroll through, I was pretty excited by this thing because we flew it with a drone, and then we collected each location individually. But then we started going in and trying to add other content. And one that really stuck out to me was this little Zitting baby. And Sam, I don't know if you want to talk about this little baby at all or not, but I'm going to tee up to do it anyway.
Yes, no, thank you. It's this is to the best of my knowledge, like I say, this was before I was born, but this looks, and I did when I was a young kid visit the gravesite of my half sister, and this is where she was buried, in that cemetery there. Interestingly, in my home, she was talked about quite, I wouldn't say all the time, but quite frequently, that we had a half sibling that unfortunately never had a chance to live in this life, that was buried in that cemetery. And things were told to us like, well, she was such a valiant and good spirit in the life before, in the spirit life, I guess you could say, that she didn't need to come and prove herself worthy on this earth, because she had already proven her valiant spirit and her willingness to obey God in the pre-existence. And so she just had to come get her body as a baby and then return back to be with God. Those are the kinds of stories that we were told about that.
That's what I was taught as well in the mainstream LDS.
Oh, really?
Yeah, was
Okay.
that, you know, children that died before the age of accountability, that they would go directly to the celestial kingdom and be
Interesting.
able to return straight to God, and that they just needed the body part. They didn't need to prove themselves.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I didn't know that it was taught the same way.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, that
Well,
was kind of my experience with that.
Yeah, this is one, folks, you might want to spend some time on, not only in the story map, but on the map itself. We actually have created a way for families who have left the FLDS to actually record a video and upload it, and it would become part of this living mapping document. And I will tell you, Sam and Melissa, I actually have met now with the UEP and given them permission to publish this and use it internally. They hope to, at one point, take what has been created and turn it into an official map. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But they've actually set up now the cemetery in a 501c3, and that will ultimately include the Carling Cemetery as well, so that there is a little more protection for families that want to do more in that cemetery than they were allowed to do when Warren Jeffs was in control and when things were so tightly controlled. So one of the next videos, I don't know if you have a comment on that. Maybe I should pause.
Oh no, just I think it's wonderful that you're doing that and putting those names and letting the families be able to do that. So just think it's awesome.
Well, that's been a blessing. Sam, I'm going to let you start with this one because basically this video for me was just going through the leadership of the FLDS, going back to the very beginnings when it was a council of friends, and then eventually leaders like Rulon Jeff started naming themselves a prophet, and then Warren Jeffs. But maybe you could just share how important that position was in this community that grew to more than 10,000 members after 2000.
Yes, it was interesting how it shifted, because back before the Jeffs, it seemed to be a lot more freedom. There seemed to be a lot more freedom in the community. We had the leadership of they claimed the same leadership for the first few prophets as the mainstream LDS church. They claim Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor. And then at that point, when mainstream LDS goes to Wilford Woodruff, they do not go to Wilford Woodruff because he signed the manifesto putting an end to polygamy. So that's where they take a turn and claim the leadership of John Woolley, and then Lauren Woolley, and then John Y. Barlow, Leroy Johnson, and then Rulon Jeffs. And of course, that line looks different depending on who you ask. If you would ask someone from the Centennial Park group, they're going to say, no, he wasn't the prophet. It was this other man that was the leader. So everyone has different opinions based on the group they now believe in, because different groups broke off as someone stood up and claimed to be the leader and the prophet. So yes, once the Jeffs came in, though, especially Warren Jeffs, but even before Warren Jeffs, his father, Rulon Jeffs, claimed to be the only man with the authority and all the keys of the priesthood, as they would say, meaning that they were the ones that would give all the rules, dictate everything as it should be, and claim that it was coming directly from God. When I was born, at that point, it had already gotten to a point where we looked at these men almost as a god, in the sense that they could do no wrong, and that as long as we were obedient to them, no matter what they asked of us, that was irrelevant. It didn't matter what they asked of us. And that's where it can get pretty scary. We would blindly obey because we thought, I've 100% believed that every word out of their mouth was coming from God. And that's just the way I was taught to believe it.
Yeah. If anybody is like super into history or the lineage of how the prophets or the one-man rule with the FLDS came to be, we had on our channel, I don't know, about a month or two ago, an LDS seminary teacher who was preparing a lesson and then came on our channel and shared his entire lesson of the history of the mainstream LDS prophets and then the Council of Friends and how these different polygamous groups broke off. And I would say it was one of the best, like most well done explanation where you can just see, he goes, now these people left the Council of Friends and formed the AUB, these people, and you can see as this list of men becomes smaller and smaller, and instead of adding counselors or apostles like it had originally started with and being a full council and having apostles, instead it went down and down, and the Jeffs never replenished that group of men until with Rulin it became a one-man rule. And so if anyone's interested in that, we do have that on our channel, and I personally thought it was super interesting to see exactly where everything split and how those leadership roles really came to be within the FLDS.
Very well laid out.
That's awesome. And folks, please make sure you're checking out Growing Up in Polygamy. The links are going to be down below, and go sign up for them. In fact, there are more people interested in this subject than people on my channel, because my channel usually covers a little different kind of a flavor of things. But this brought up a really important point that I wanted to bring out, and that is that when I was investigating cult crimes and when the Ritual Crime Task Force was in play, and we looked at roughly 300 good, solid criminal cases over the couple of years that we had the task force up and running, we determined that there really are two kinds of people involved in these kinds of societies or polygamous groups, at least in the Western United States. I didn't study the Amish close enough to look at those, or the Mennonites or others. But what we found is there are generational members of closed societies, like Sam was, raised from infancy in an ideology, and they were very difficult to provide any kind of additional thought processes or concepts to, because they were raised in a protective environment. They were raised to ignore or even run away from those of us in the outside world, and they were very extreme in the belief system that they had, really unmoldable in most cases. Then you had these generational groups. Then you had these convert groups where somebody all of a sudden found some charismatic leader and they decided, hey, I'm going to go hook up and be a member of that cult and go do things and follow them. They still had a network of support behind the scenes that they could reach back to if things fell apart. Versus when, Sam, it came time for you to say, this doesn't work for me, you were left with no support system from your existing family or your history behind you. And that convert could always go back home and hopefully not hear a family member say, I told you so, but have welcoming arms that help them sort through the change they went through. What are your thoughts on that?
That's very true. It is. And the converts to the FLDS, that was a very small number. Not many converted from a different religion or a different background to the FLDS. However, my father's first wife did. She converted to the FLDS church. And so it did happen on occasion. But yes, for me and for those of us that grew up in the FLDS, if we chose any kind of different lifestyle or chose not to follow exactly and be obedient perfectly to the rules of the FLDS, and especially when it came to Warren Jeffs and when he became the prophet, we were no longer allowed to be with our family. And that's what happened to me. I wasn't allowed to go back and be with my family if I didn't live exactly how they wanted me to.
You know, I think, Melissa, about that, as Sam and I stood at the cemetery, I talked to him about going back and if he could ever walk through the doors and have a conversation with family or sit down for lunch. And it's really sad to me how those who have left, considered apostate, are never allowed to come back. In fact, frankly, almost biblical-esque, removed from the records of a family's existence even.
Yeah, no, it's definitely heartbreaking. It's sad to see someone you love not be able to communicate. And I wish that I could, just tell his mother what a wonderful man he is and that he's amazing and just so good and such a good husband and father. And so I feel all this pride for him and for like the amazing person he is. And it's so sad to see someone that is so just good, like in every way, just such a good person, still be considered evil and in the wrong and cast out and exiled and considered an apostate. Like, breaks my heart as a wife. It makes me sad. And sometimes it makes me a little angry too, because I'm like, he's such a good person. How can you be, and I understand it. I understand their religious conviction behind their feelings, but it's heartbreaking and frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and I can speak for this too, because I was once in the FLDS and I had my feelings towards those that left because it's just the way we were conditioned. And so I know that my mother has those kinds of feelings that once you leave, it's impossible to be this really good person because in some way or another, you become in control, or Satan takes control of your life, is what we were taught. If you leave, you are now on Satan's ground.
And you can't be happy.
You can't be happy. You can't be in control. So any happiness you might feel is a lie because it is just Satan giving you that temporary joy so that you can continue to go along with his plan. Things like that. So those are, unfortunately, I know some of the thoughts that my mother is having towards me.
Yeah, crazy. Well, the next series that we went through, this was still during a time when I was investigating a lot down in the community. As the year 2000 neared, Rulon Jeffs came up with this idea that the world was going to come to an end. And Rulon then started having all of the membership in the church come and move back to Hilldale, Colorado City, where their Zion was going to be established after this apocalyptic moment. And that, when it didn't happen, started what I call the rise of Warren Jeffs. And we're timing, we should have booked out 2 or 3 hours for this, but maybe you could share just a little bit about what that was like living through the apocalypse as a member of the FLDS.
Well, it was interesting. There were so many times where we were told that the end of the world was near, that we had to be prepared now. Now was the time. We cannot wait till tomorrow. If we're not perfect tomorrow, we'll probably be destroyed with the wicked. Those kinds of things were told to us to kick us in gear and make sure that we were being obedient. And we were told about famine and wars and all these different things that were coming to our door because we were the elite. We were the few that were chosen by God, and the rest of the world was against us. And we would have other countries coming to try to take us over to destroy God's people because Satan was controlling them. And so when people in northern Utah were told, hey, this place is going to be overrun by evil people, we need to be out and in Short Creek where it's safe. Of course, everyone that still believed in the FLDS belief, they rushed to Short Creek. I was already in Short Creek. And so the town, we suddenly started seeing a lot of new faces. And it was quite the change. And it was just a different vibe almost immediately after that. Of course, nothing happened. Here's the tricky thing is, in our eyes, nothing happened. But of course, Warren Jeffs, specifically Warren Jeffs, would still claim, he would turn it around and blame the members. He would say, well, nothing happened because you weren't prepared enough. God is in heaven weeping tears because he wants this work to move forward, and it's your fault. You're not good enough. That is why God's work is not moving forward. So now the next date is in 2000 and whatever. And now we have to be prepared. This is the last time. This is our last chance. If we don't get this one right, we're all destroyed. And it would just be one thing after another. But it was so quick for Warren Jeffs to just turn it on the people and blame them for anything not happening.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things that or at least for me, that I've recently learned, we just barely wrapped up an interview with one of Warren Jeffs' sons.
Yeah.
And that just recently left. And that video will be coming out next week. But we were kind of asking him about this transition, like whether or not as a child you knew, like, was Warren conspiring this whole time for power? Because from the outside, it seems like, he was definitely in his father's ear a lot. And I thought it was really interesting that his son was like, he didn't believe that his father could die, which was something within the community, that Rulon was never going to die.
Right.
And he said, like, when his grandfather died, that Warren was actually in shock. And at first, and like almost didn't know what to do. Like, okay, that wasn't supposed to happen. He said it actually took like a month before he felt like, okay, well, I'm going to step into this and take care of this. But the idea that the transition was shocking at all to him, like that he must have truly believed that Rulon was really going to live, is kind of an interesting perspective that I had never heard, because everybody's looking from the outside in going, oh, this was his plan the whole time. But he may have believed the whole time that there was never even going to be a chance for him to be a prophet if his father kept living.
I think that Warren Jeffs hit it very well. I think any of his intentions and any of his plans were very well hidden from, especially us, but even from his own family members.
Yeah.
And yes, there may have been some shock, but it's clear by some of the things that he was having his father do after Rulon Jeffs had his stroke, that Warren was definitely having some things happen for his own guilt and guilty pleasure, I guess you could call it. So there was something going on there.
Yeah, it's just interesting to
but
hear
his
all
son,
different
but
perspectives.
Warren's son did not know that Warren had any intention of taking over the church.
Yeah, that was orchestrated and done masterfully, I might say. And as he became prophet, I remember the Mel Brooks film, It's Good to Be King, because he not only took over all of the holdings, but he took over all of his father's wives, except for two, one who just flat ran into the night screaming, if I remember right, and another one who was held, correct me, held hostage for a short time, and then finally just said, I will not be married to you, Warren. And I'm going to skip through this slide, other than to just say, folks, I had the opportunity to go in and spend time with one of Warren Jeffs' wives, one inside of the home that she was forced to live in. And we toured the home. And so there's a video going through the home and talking about a secret compartment in the home and other things consistent with that. But Sam, as I move past that one and the next two videos, because our time is running out, Who's Who in the Zoo and the Raid on Short Creek, which people can go back and visit. And we'll talk about, well, in fact, I'm not even going to talk about this, and see how Warren Jeffs escaped. I want to pause with where we are tonight, which is talking about coercive control, but reminding people that one of those women who, in my opinion, was forced to marry an old man was a sibling of yours, and maybe you could chat about that.
Yes. So, oh boy. Sorry. Could you add again the question? I think I missed it.
Just the fact that.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sorry, I was reading comments over here, trying to listen to two things at once. So yes, my sister, when I was very young. I'm trying to remember how young I must have been. I can't think of exact, but I'm guessing about 11, 12 years old is when my sister married Rulon Jeffs. And to me and everyone in my family, or at least so it seemed, it was this huge honor. My sister would have been about 19 years old. Rulon Jeffs was, if not nearing 20 or nearing 80 years old, and my sister was, I believe, his 60th wife. So it was, looking back now, I'm thinking, wow, I can't imagine my sister was too excited about it, but it sure seemed like she was, because we were taught our whole life that to be a part of the family of the prophet was the greatest honor anyone could possibly wish for. And so it was just, in my family, it seemed like it was this huge honor. And yes, there were tears and red faces and things that I saw, but I just assumed it was tears of excitement, I guess you could say. Now, looking back now, and with a daughter of my own, oh my gosh, I honestly, it's hard for me to imagine that people allowed certain things to happen. But when you're in it, when I was in the religion, fully believing if the prophet said something, it was straight from God. Therefore, no one questioned him. And so it was at that time that the relationship between my family and the Jeffs family started to grow, I guess you could say. I spent many different times in the home of Rulon Jeffs, in the offices there, and also Warren Jeffs would come out and say hi to us. And it's interesting the control that your mind can have over your feelings because of the belief I had in these men, believing that they were men of God. To this day, I remember walking into the home of Rulon Jeffs and feeling like I had died and gone to heaven. It was just a peaceful, the amount of joy that I felt in that moment. It was just a testimony builder to me that, wow, these really are men of God. And how could anyone not believe this? And, it's just so interesting to me now, knowing what was going on behind closed doors during that same time, where Warren Jeffs was abusing his own family in many different ways, but including sexual abuse. And so it's so crazy to me that I was able to feel that peace and joy because of the way I was raised to believe in them and believe who they were, even though all this stuff was going on.
Was your sister who married Rulon, did she get married to Warren after, or didn't she get married to one of Warren's brothers?
Yes. So yes, a lot of them married Warren Jeffs, but my sister did not. She was married to Warren Jeffs' older brother. And then at some point he was forced out of the community because Warren said that he was no longer worthy. And so he was kicked out. And then my wife was married, or my sister was married to another one of Warren's brothers. And so, I mean, just the amount of passing people around and forcing people to do this and that, and it's just so sickening now to think back on it.
Yeah, it really is. Folks, I wanted to just share with you, one of our viewers purchased 10 books, 10 copies of my book, Deceived. If there are any Profiling Evil members who have not purchased Deceived and would like a free copy, and you live in the United States, because I'm not shipping overseas, sorry, if you'll email me at profilingevil@gmail.com, the first 10 people, courtesy of Candace Plumley, who many of you know, she's from Australia, Sam and Melissa, and didn't know if she could make it at this hour to be on with everyone, because I wanted her to pick out who gets it. But please feel free to email, and I'll get them to Candace, and she can decide who's going to get the free books, and we'll get those shipped out in the next week. But our time is really going way too fast for my taste. But I want to share, folks, that there are some cool episodes still coming that I hope you'll check every Friday night for the next 3 nights, or next 3 Fridays. Next week, I'm going to be talking about the FLDS Exodus, when Warren Jeffs sent out a dictate that they weren't asking the FLDS to come like they did in 2000, as believing there was an apocalyptic event happening under Rulon Jeffs. But once the apostates started getting a stronger foothold in Short Creek, Colorado City, Hilldale, the dictate has come to start moving throughout the United States. And next week, I'm going to show a map of where they're moving and what communities they're going into. Then the following week will be our last episode, which will be inside the secret FLDS polygamous caves, something that I heard ghost stories about my entire law enforcement career, but could never prove, something that only a small handful of members of the FLDS even knew existed, and something that I'm going to ask Sam about in just 1 minute, because I was able to share with him what those caves look like. And then after that, there's one more, which is a story map that I've created that takes from start to finish the entire journey that we've been doing on profiling evil. So Sam, I'm going to leave you the final word about the secret caves that you finally got to see the inside of.
Yes, so they were very secretive. I remember riding my bike near the entrance of the cave when I was living out there as a young boy. And yes, I was able to get right up to the door, but there were these big bars, this gate, the really thick bars on this gate with a thick chain and padlock. So I was never able to see inside of them personally, in person anyway. But I was always under the impression that there was some kind of food storage and weapons in there that would help protect us if ever anyone came to take over the town. But I was also under the impression that only a very few select people would ever be welcomed in. So I assumed that that was a great cave for someone's protection, but that it would never benefit me. So, but yes, watching the video with you, that was a really cool experience to finally see what was inside there. I had no idea how big it was, though. After seeing this video with you, it was crazy to me how deep these tunnels are, and the different rooms, and even the bathrooms and toilets, and so many different pieces and parts to this that I had no idea were in there.
I'm so excited to watch the video. I'm going to be watching next Friday. I'm so excited. I'm like, I haven't seen these yet.
Yeah.
So next Friday is going to be the where are the FLDS going to? And then the following Friday will be the episode on the caves. And the ghost stories that I always worried about, Sam and Melissa, were that the FLDS were storing explosives and weapons, all part of that response that happened because of the 1953 raid. And that episode that we end with will be one that answers a lot of questions that a lot of people have that you already know the answer to, but you're not going to share until it comes out. And then the week after that, I'll publish just the story map so that everyone can go through and watch the entire thing. But there have been a number of questions, Sam, Melissa. I wish that we had more time, but I hope that you will take time to go back through the chat box and maybe answer some of the folks' questions and spend some time with them. And to all the people who watch Profiling Evil, I want to say thank you, but I want to especially thank Sam and Melissa of growing up in polygamy, because this has been a rich experience. And like some of you have even indicated in there, these are two kids that I would be proud to list in my family. And we recently went to a dinner together for survivors who have escaped polygamy. And we sat with another young couple that had escaped polygamy. And it was just a wonderful evening to be with you. I love you too. And I'm so grateful you took time to be with me tonight.
Oh, we love you too. And we were so happy to be here. So thank you so much for including us.
Yes, thank you so much, Mike. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having us with you tonight.
Well, thanks again. And folks, from all of us at Profiling Evil, make sure you check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and of course, Twitter. And if you like audio podcasts, check out Profiling Evil on your favorite podcast platform. And I just agreed today to do a couple of presentations at CrimeCon in Nashville at the end of May. So if you're going to CrimeCon, make sure you enter the keyword profiling evil and you'll get a discount on your membership, and we'll have a chance to get together and spend some time there meeting in person. But from all of us at Profiling Evil, thank you. Make sure if you want Deceived, courtesy of Candace Plumley, one of our channel members, that you send an email, and she gets to decide. So don't hold me responsible if you don't get picked in that group of 10. But thanks, everyone, and have a great evening.